If I survive, kiss me. The orc gladiator told the human healer. If I survive, kiss me. Ruva said it as if she were asking Jonas to tighten a bandage. Outside the infirmary, 40,000 people stamped their feet against the stone terraces of the grand arena. Dust trembled from the ceiling. Bronze horns sounded above the northern gate, announcing that the final trial would begin in 12 minutes. Jonas kept one hand against the bandage around Ruva's ribs and looked up at her. She sat on the edge of the treatment table wearing black arena armor over a dark red fighting tunic. Even seated, she was nearly as tall as he was. Her skin was a rich olive green, deepened by the amber lamplight. Two short ivory tusks curved past her lower lip. Thick black hair had been braided from one shaved temple and tied with 3 copper rings. A pale scar crossed the bridge of her nose, but it was the fresh bruise beneath her left ribs that held Jonas's attention. That bruise should have kept her from standing. In 12 minutes, she intended to fight 3 champions for her freedom. "You have a cracked rib," he said. "I know. Your right shoulder is barely staying in place. You fixed it. Temporarily. Then temporarily is enough." The crowd roared again. Somewhere beyond the iron door, chains rattled as the arena attendants prepared the gate. Jonas reached for another strip of linen, because linen was easier to understand than the request she had just made. "Ruva. That is still my name. You cannot say something like that before walking into a death match and expect me to pretend it is ordinary." Her amber eyes remained on him. There was humor in them, but no uncertainty. "Nothing about you has ever been ordinary, healer." He stopped wrapping the bandage. For 4 months, Jonas had cleaned her wounds, reset her fingers, stitched her skin, and argued with her about rest. He knew how she hid pain by becoming quiet. He knew she hated mint tonic, slept badly before rain, and touched the copper rings in her braid whenever she thought about home. He had learned all of that without once asking what would happen if she ever became free. Perhaps he had been afraid of the answer. "And if you do not survive?" he asked. Ruva leaned closer. The noise outside seemed to fall away until he could hear only her breathing and the soft scrape of armor against the table. "Then you will regret taking so long." Before he could answer, the lock turned. Arena Master Malrek entered with 4 guards. He wore a white coat without a single mark of dust, though the grand arena produced enough dust to bury a city. Silver hair lay smooth against his temples. A gold key hung at his throat, the symbol of ownership for every contracted fighter beneath the arena roof. His gaze moved from Ruva to Jonas's hand against her ribs. "The crowd is waiting," he said. Jonas did not remove his hand. "She is not fit to fight. She is breathing. That is not the same thing." "Today it is." Malrek nodded to the guards. Ruva stood before they could touch her. Pain tightened her face for less than a second, then disappeared behind the expression the city knew. The cold, fearless mask of the undefeated orc gladiator. Only Jonas saw her left hand tremble. She walked toward the gate. At the door, Ruva looked back at him. She touched 2 fingers to her mouth, then pointed at Jonas. The crowd shouted her name as the guards closed the iron door between them. 4 months earlier, Jonas had not known her name. He had known only the sound of the arena horn and the fact that he had made a terrible decision. The grand arena rose from the center of Velan like a mountain built to hold violence. Its outer walls were painted with heroic victories. Its inner corridors smelled of old stone, lamp oil, sweat, and the bitter herbs used to hide blood from wealthy visitors. Jonas arrived on a rainy morning carrying 1 leather medical case and a letter that appointed him assistant healer for the lower fighting chambers. The previous assistant had resigned after 2 days. Weak stomach, the gate clerk explained. Why did the one before him leave? Jonas asked. Strong conscience. The clerk laughed at his own answer. Jonas did not. He had trained at the charity hospital near the Eastern Wall, where no one asked whether a patient could pay before stopping the bleeding. When the hospital lost its winter funding, Malrek offered enough gold to keep the Eastern Ward open for a year. Jonas accepted the arena position because 60 poor families needed medicine more than he needed to feel honorable. That was the reason he repeated to himself while descending beneath the stands. The infirmary contained 6 stone beds, 2 cabinets, and a drain in the center of the floor. One wall separated it from the fighters' corridor. Every time the crowd cheered, the instruments rattled on their hooks. Malrek showed Jonas the room personally. Your duty is simple, he said. Keep valuable fighters alive. Make injured ones presentable. Do not interfere with contracts, punishments, or match assignments. And fighters who are not valuable? Malrek smiled. Everyone has value. Some values are simply lower. He left a ledger on the table. Names filled one side, prices filled the other. Jonas turned the ledger face down. His first morning passed with sprained wrists, split lips, and a young fighter who wept silently, while Jonas removed a piece of wooden shield from his arm. By afternoon, Jonas understood why the former assistant's conscience had become inconvenient. Near sunset, the arena shook with the loudest cheer of the day. The iron door opened. 2 attendants carried in an orc woman on a broken shield. She pushed them away before the shield touched the table. I can stand, she said. Then her right knee failed. Jonas caught her beneath the arms. She was heavier than he expected, not from size alone, but from armor, muscle, and the stubborn refusal to let anyone support her. Rich green skin showed beneath the torn straps at her shoulder. One side of her black hair had been shaved close. The rest formed a thick braid down her back. 2 short tusks framed a mouth pressed tight against pain. The attendants backed away. That is Ruva, one whispered, as if the name itself might hear him. Jonas helped her sit. Where are you hurt? Nowhere. Blood ran from a cut above her eyebrow. He waited. She stared at him. He stared back. You are new, she said. You are bleeding on my floor. Malrek's floor. Then I am sure he will be devastated. One tusk lifted as her mouth almost smiled. Ruva touched her left side. Ribs. Anything else? Shoulder, knee, 2 fingers. That is an interesting definition of nowhere. Jonas reached toward the buckle on her shoulder armor. Her green hand closed around his wrist. The room changed. She did not squeeze hard, but she could have broken the bones without effort. Ask, she said. Jonas looked at her hand, then at her amber eyes. May I remove the shoulder guard? Ruva released him. Yes. He unfastened the leather carefully. Beneath it, her shoulder had swollen around the joint. This will hurt. Everything hurts. That is not permission. Her eyes narrowed with surprise. Jonas held her gaze. May I examine it? After a moment, she nodded. His fingers moved over the injured muscle, light and precise. Ruva stayed still until he reached the back of the joint. Her breath caught. Dislocated, he said. I can reset it now. Do it. There is a numbing tonic. No. It will take effect in... No. He recognized fear beneath the refusal, though nothing in her expression admitted it. Why? Because the last healer gave me a sleeping draft. I woke in the punishment cell. Jonas glanced toward the attendants. They found the ceiling very interesting. He placed the sealed tonic bottle where she could see it. I will not give you anything you do not choose. Ruva studied him as if searching for a trap. "Reset it," she said. Jonas folded a strip of leather for her to bite. She pushed it away. "I have tusks, not porcelain teeth. The leather is for the rest of us. Your scream may frighten the attendants." Both attendants stepped farther back. That time, Ruva did smile. Jonas braced her arm, warned her once, and set the joint with a clean movement. She made no sound, but her left hand seized the edge of the stone table hard enough to leave shallow marks. When it was done, Jonas supported the arm in a sling. "You need 7 days without fighting. I fight in 3. Then tell Malrek you cannot. You are very new." She stood, favoring the injured knee. Jonas blocked the door. Ruva looked down at him. "Move. Not until I wrap your ribs." "You think you can stop me?" "No. I think you will stop because breathing matters more than frightening me." The attendants exchanged a glance that suggested they expected to carry Jonas out next. Ruva stared for a long moment. Then she returned to the table. That was how it began. Not with desire. Not with a rescue. With a bandage, a question, and one stubborn woman deciding to sit down. If you enjoy original orc-bound fantasy romances and want to support the creation of future stories, you can join Tales from Orc on Patreon. The link is waiting in the description. Now, back to Ruva and Jonas. 3 days later, Ruva won her match with one arm held close to her body. She returned to the infirmary after dark. Jonas was replacing boiled instruments in the cabinet. "You tore the shoulder again." "Good evening to you too. Sit. You have become commanding." "I have become tired." She sat. This time, when he reached for the armor buckle, she nodded before he asked. Jonas still asked. The wound was not as bad as he feared. He cleaned the cut, replaced the sling, and gave her a cup of bitter willow tea. Ruva smelled it suspiciously. "No mint?" "No mint." "How did you know I hate mint?" "You threw the last cup at the wall." That might have been criticism of the cup. The cup was innocent. She drank. After that, she began visiting even when her injuries were small. A bruised knuckle required 10 minutes. A cut no longer than a fingernail required 15. Once she arrived with no visible wound at all and claimed her left boot was causing pain. Jonas examined the boot. "This is not a medical condition. It is uncomfortable. It is 2 sizes too small. Then cure it." He found a knife, cut the leather near the toe, and added a soft strip of bandage around the heel. Ruva watched him work. "You repair boots too?" "Only when the patient is too frightening to disappoint." "You are less frightened every day." "You are less frightening every day." She leaned one elbow on the table. "That sounds like an insult." "It is a diagnosis." The infirmary became the only place beneath the arena where Ruva did not have to perform strength for an audience. Jonas learned to read the difference between pain she could endure and pain that meant something was wrong. Ruva learned that his quietness was not fear, and his gentleness was not weakness. He discovered that she had been a caravan guard before the arena. Her employer had refused to pay 6 orc workers after a journey south. When Ruva demanded their wages, the man accused her of theft. Malrek purchased the sentence, paid the false debt, and turned it into a 7-year fighting contract. "How long remains?" Jonas asked. 2 years, 8 months, and 12 days. "You count the days?" "I count everything that belongs to me." "What will you do when it ends?" Ruva touched the 3 copper rings in her braid. "Go north." "Family?" "A younger sister, if she still remembers me." Jonas wanted to tell her that no one could forget her. The sentence felt too intimate, so he returned to grinding herbs. "And you?" she asked. "What about me?" "What do you count?" "Hospital beds, medicine bottles, coins when the quartermaster is watching." "Days?" Jonas looked toward the ceiling as the crowd roared for someone else's pain. "Not yet." Winter settled over Veylan. Rain filled the gutters above, while the arena continued beneath canvas awnings. Jonas spent mornings at the Eastern Charity Hospital and afternoons below the fighting floor. He slept when exhaustion made the decision for him. Ruva noticed. One evening she found him asleep at the desk, with his head beside an open ledger. He woke to the unfamiliar weight of a wool cloak across his shoulders. Ruva sat on the opposite treatment table, sharpening a short arena blade. "That cloak is yours," he said. "Your powers of diagnosis remain impressive. You will be cold. I am an orc. Orcs become cold. Not while watching humans argue with blankets." Jonas kept the cloak around his shoulders. Neither mentioned it again. The first time Ruva touched him without medical necessity happened 2 weeks later. A fighter struck Jonas in the corridor during a panic after losing his match. The blow split Jonas's lower lip. Before the guards could respond, Ruva placed herself between them. She did not raise her voice. She only looked at the fighter. He apologized. Then he apologized again, to be certain. Inside the infirmary, Ruva wet a cloth and held it toward Jonas. "I can manage," he said. "Sit." He almost laughed at hearing his own command return to him. He sat. Ruva stopped with the cloth near his mouth. "May I?" The question changed something between them. Yes, her green hand was large enough to cover one side of his face, but her touch was careful. She cleaned the blood from his lip. Amber eyes fixed on the task. Jonas became aware of the warmth of her fingers, the faint scent of ironwood oil in her braid, and how close her tusks were to his mouth. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Not anymore." Her eyes lifted to his. For one suspended moment, neither moved. Then a horn sounded above them. Ruva stepped back. Jonas hated the horn for the rest of the week. At the beginning of spring, Malrek announced the Crown of Ashes. The tournament occurred only once every 10 years. 12 contracted fighters would enter. Each round removed half. The final survivor would receive a purse large enough to purchase any arena contract, including their own. Malrek made the announcement from a gold balcony, while flower petals fell into the fighting pit. Ruva stood among the selected gladiators below. Jonas watched from the healer's gate. The crowd shouted for blood. Ruva looked only at the gold key hanging from Malrek's throat. That evening, she entered the infirmary carrying a folded paper. "Read this," she said. Jonas opened it. The tournament agreement promised freedom to the final champion. It also released the arena from responsibility for death, permanent injury, poison, structural failure, animal attack, and what the document called acts of public enthusiasm. "This contract could excuse the sun falling out of the sky," he said. "Can I win?" "That is not a medical question. It is when I ask you." Jonas looked at her. "You can win if the fights are fair." "They will not be." "Then why enter?" "Because 2 years and 8 months is too long." She touched the copper rings in her braid. Jonas knew she was thinking of her sister. "Malrek will never let his most valuable fighter leave," he said. "Then he should not have written a contract the entire city can understand. He wrote 6 pages explaining why he can kill you. And 1 sentence promising freedom." She took the paper from him and folded it along the same sharp lines. "I need you to help me reach that sentence." Jonas wanted to refuse. He wanted to tell her that freedom purchased with a grave was not freedom. Instead, he asked to examine her shoulder. The old injury remained unstable. Her ribs had healed, but scar tissue restricted her right side. 3 weeks of preparation would not repair years of damage. It might, however, teach her how to protect it. "Morning before the first bell," he said. "The infirmary will be empty. For treatment. For work." They began the next day. Jonas used resistance bands made from braided linen to strengthen the muscles around her shoulder. He taught her to recognize the first warning of a joint slipping out of place. Ruva showed him how arena fighters disguised weakness by changing the rhythm of their feet. He changed her diet, replaced the bitter performance tonic supplied by Malrek, and forced her to rest 1 day in every 4. Ruva objected to the resting. She objected in the infirmary, in the corridor, and once from outside his locked door for nearly an hour. Jonas did not open it. The following morning, he found an apple placed neatly on his chair with a short arena knife through its center. He kept the knife. As the tournament approached, the city discovered a softer version of Ruva it had invented for itself. Merchants sold green ribbons. Children wore painted tusks. A tavern created a drink called the Orc's Kiss, though Ruva said it tasted like sweetened lamp oil. "They love you now," Jonas said as they crossed an empty training yard before dawn. "They love winning." "Is there a difference?" "Ask them after I lose." She moved through the sequence he had designed, guarding the weak shoulder and turning with her left side. Sweat shone across her green arms. Jonas tried to watch her posture rather than the powerful movement of her body. He was not always successful. Ruva noticed. "Your attention has moved away from my shoulder," she said. Jonas nearly dropped the roll of bandage in his hand. "I am studying your balance." "My balance is lower? Your stance is too wide." "It has not changed." "Then perhaps I need breakfast." Her laughter followed him all the way to the infirmary. The first tournament round filled the arena before noon. Ruva faced an armored spearman from the western mines. The fight lasted 9 minutes. She used his shield against him, trapped his spear beneath one boot, and forced him to surrender without breaking a bone. The crowd loved her mercy almost as much as it had expected to love his death. She returned with a shallow cut along her forearm. Jonas cleaned it while Ruva watched his face. "You were afraid," she said. "I was working." "You stood at the gate with both hands closed." "That is how hands behave when not in use." "You did not breathe for the final minute." "Were you watching me or your opponent?" "Both." His fingers paused around her wrist. "That seems medically unwise." "You have made me very interested in unwise things." Ruva turned her green hand beneath his until their palms met. It was not an accident. Jonas looked toward the open door. No attendants. No guards. "Ruva," he said. "Still my name." He wanted to kiss her then. He wanted to know whether the warmth he felt in her palm would exist at her mouth. But the tournament contract lay folded inside her armor, and every choice she made could be mistaken for gratitude toward the man helping her survive. Jonas slowly released her hand. Something guarded returned to her eyes. "Your bandage needs to remain dry," he said. "Of course." She left before he finished putting away the linen. For the next 3 days, Ruva visited only for scheduled treatment. She answered questions with as few words as possible. She stopped bringing bad excuses and injured boots. Jonas told himself distance was safer. Safety felt remarkably like regret. Before the second round, he found her alone beneath the eastern stairs, tightening the straps on her arm guard. "Your shoulder wrap is wrong," he said. "I did it myself." "I can see that." "Then you can also see I do not require help." Jonas knelt beside her, but did not touch the strap. "I owe you an apology." Ruva kept working. I thought stepping away was respectful, he continued. It was also cowardly. Her hand stopped. What were you afraid of? That you might believe my care came with a price. Ruva looked down at him. And did I? I do not know. You could have asked. The words struck with perfect accuracy. Jonas bowed his head. May I fix the wrap? Yes. He loosened the leather and passed the linen beneath her arm. His fingers remained careful and professional, though every part of him remembered her palm against his. When this is over, Ruva said, I will not owe you anything. I know. If I touch you, it is because I choose to. Jonas tied the final knot. I know. Do you? He rose until they stood close enough that her breath warmed his forehead. I am trying to. Ruva studied him. Then she placed one finger beneath his chin and tipped his face upward. Try faster. The second horn called her to the arena. This time Jonas hated it for 2 weeks. Ruva won the second round, but the victory was ugly. Her opponent's blade had been blunted according to tournament law. A sharp ridge remained near the hilt, hidden beneath black wax. It tore through the side of Ruva's armor when they grappled. She finished the fight before the crowd understood she was injured. Jonas met her inside the gate. Blood darkened her tunic. Table, he ordered. I can walk. Wonderful. Walk to the table. The cut was long but shallow. Jonas stitched it while anger made his hands colder than fear. The weapon was altered, he said. Yes. Malrek knows. Probably. You say that as if we are discussing weather. Weather is less predictable. Jonas tied the stitch too tightly. Ruva flinched. He stopped immediately. I am sorry. You are angry. He's trying to kill you. Many people try. Stop making that sound ordinary. Ruva's expression softened. It was ordinary before you arrived. Jonas looked at her. She took his wrist and placed his hand over the steady beat at the base of her throat. Still here, she said. His palm rested against warm green skin. Her pulse was strong beneath the scarred edge of her collar. That is not enough for me anymore, he whispered. Ruva's amber eyes held his. Good, she said. Footsteps approached. They separated just before 2 attendants entered with another wounded fighter. Jonas worked until midnight, when the infirmary finally emptied, he inspected the waxed blade. The hidden ridge carried traces of a gray residue. He scraped it into a glass dish, added vinegar, and watched the liquid turn violet. Frost root. In small amounts, it slowed the heart and weakened the muscles. In larger amounts, it stopped breathing. The cut had delivered only a little into Ruva's blood, enough to make the third match harder, not enough to prove intention if she collapsed. Jonas opened the supply cabinet. The performance tonic issued for Ruva's recovery stood on the upper shelf. He tested it. Violet spread through the bowl. Someone had been poisoning her from both sides of the gate. Jonas poured the tonic into the drain and replaced it with colored willow water. Then he placed the waxed blade and the glass sample inside his locked medical case. The following morning, Malrek waited in the infirmary. He sat in Jonas's chair with white gloves folded across one knee. You discarded expensive medicine, he said. Jonas set down his bag. It was contaminated. Was it? Frost root. Malrek's expression remained pleasantly blank. A common pain treatment. Not at that dose. You are an arena employee, not a magistrate. I am a healer. You are a man whose hospital receives a generous donation every month. There it was. The gold chain Jonas had pretended was not around his own neck. Malrek stood and walked to the cabinet. Ruva has earned this city a great deal of money. Her death in the final would earn considerably more. You admit it. To whom will you repeat the admission? The guards whose wages I pay? The magistrate seated in my private box? The hospital director who signs my receipts? Jonas thought of the waxed blade hidden in his case. Malrek followed his glance. Search the room, he told the guards outside. 4 men entered. Jonas reached the case first. A guard struck him across the back and forced him against the table. Another took the case, opened it, and removed the blade and violet sample. Malrek held the glass toward the light. Evidence is such a delicate thing, he said. He dropped it. The dish shattered on stone. From this moment forward, you will administer only the medicine provided. If Ruva asks questions, tell her the weakness is a consequence of her wounds. Jonas straightened slowly. No. Malrek sighed. You misunderstand your position. No. I finally understand it. Your hospital closes within a week without my payment. Then I will tell them why. And Ruva? Malrek asked. Will you tell her that her healer sacrificed 60 sick families for the pleasure of feeling righteous? Jonas had no answer that did not hurt. Malrek smiled. Prepare her for the semifinal. He left the broken glass on the floor. Ruva arrived an hour later. Jonas had swept away every violet fragment, but he could not hide his split knuckle or the dark mark forming along his jaw. Who touched you? She asked. No one important. She closed the door. That was not an answer. Jonas looked toward the small ventilation grate above them. Arena corridors carried sound in unexpected directions. He took a clean bandage and wrote one word across it with charcoal. Poison. Ruva read it without changing expression. Jonas burned the cloth over a lamp. Your muscles may feel weak, he said aloud. The second fight strained the shoulder more than I expected. Can it be treated? Not with the tonic supplied here. He removed a harmless bottle from his private bag and placed it in her palm. Their fingers closed around it together. How long? She asked. Long enough. For what? Jonas met her eyes. For you to choose. Ruva drank the safe mixture. Then she handed him the empty bottle as if nothing had happened. I choose the semifinal, she said. I knew you would. You disapprove. Completely. But you will help me. Completely. Ruva touched his bruised jaw with the back of her fingers. Afterward, she said, you will tell me who did this. Afterward. The semifinal opponent was not a person. Malrek released a stone horn into the arena. The animal stood twice as high as Ruva's shoulder, plated in natural gray armor with 2 curved horns. It had been frightened by drums and driven through the gate with burning straw. The crowd's delight turned uneasy. Jonas stood at the healer's entrance, both hands closed. Ruva did not attack. She waited for the stone horn's first charge, rolled beneath one sweeping horn, and cut the leather straps holding a spiked harness across its back. The metal fell away. On the second charge, she used her red cloak to turn the animal toward the empty western wall. By the third, the stone horn no longer saw her as the threat. It saw the open gate behind the handlers. The beast charged through it. Attendants scattered. The crowd rose laughing and shouting as Ruva climbed onto the low wall instead of finishing the frightened animal. Malrek had offered them a killing. Ruva gave them a rebellion with horns. The judges had no rule for what happened. The stone horn was alive. Ruva remained alone in the fighting ground. The crowd had already declared her winner. Malrek could either accept the result or admit the rules belonged only to him. He accepted. Ruva returned through the gate smiling. Jonas caught her when the smile disappeared. Her knees folded. Her skin felt cold. Despite the safe medicine, enough frost root remained in her body from the altered blade to weaken her heart. Jonas carried her into the infirmary, with her arm around his neck. "You are stronger than you look," she murmured. "You are easier to carry when unconscious." "I am not unconscious." "Then stop helping so badly." He laid her on the table and mixed charcoal, salt, and bitter root to draw the remaining poison through her stomach. She drank because he asked. He warmed her with blankets and placed heated stones along her sides. For 2 hours, Jonas counted every breath. Ruva woke after sunset. The crowd had gone. Rain tapped against the high ventilation shaft. One lamp burned beside them. Jonas sat with his hand around her wrist, measuring the pulse. "Still here," she said. His eyes closed. "Do not ever say that to me as if it is enough." Ruva turned her hand inside his until their fingers joined. "What is enough?" He looked at her lying beneath his coat and the rough arena blankets. Without the public mask, she looked exhausted, vulnerable, and more powerful for allowing him to see it. "Morning," he said. Then another. Then enough mornings that you stop counting them. Ruva's thumb moved over his knuckles. "That sounds expensive." "I have very little sense with money. I noticed your boots." Jonas laughed despite himself. Ruva shifted, making space on the edge of the wide treatment table. "Sit properly," she said. "I am sitting." "You are folded over like a grieving heron." He moved beside her. Their shoulders touched beneath his coat. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Ruva rested her head against him. Jonas stayed until dawn. The arena bells woke them, not the measured bronze notes that announced a new match. These were faster, harder, struck without rhythm. The sound rolled through the stone like a warning from something buried beneath the city. Ruva lifted her head at once. Jonas reached for her shoulder before she could rise. Slowly. "Those are the crown bells." "I know." "Then you know slowly is no longer available." She swung her feet to the floor. Pain crossed her face, sharp and brief. By the time she stood, it had disappeared behind the expression the arena knew. Calm, distant, and dangerous. Jonas hated how easily she could put that expression on. He checked her pulse, the movement of her pupils, and the strength in her injured arm. The poison was leaving her blood, but not quickly enough. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was not. "You can walk," he said. "You can fight for a little while. But if the rib shifts or the shoulder fails, I know what happens. I need you to hear me say it." Ruva looked down at him. "Then say it. You could die?" The last bell faded. She reached for the leather armor waiting on the bench. That was true yesterday. Jonas caught the edge of the breastplate before she could lift it. Yesterday Malrek was trying to weaken you. Today he knows we discovered it. Then today he will be less subtle. That is not comforting. It was not meant to be. Together they fitted the armor around her ribs. Jonas added a narrow brace beneath the leather, wrapping it firmly enough to protect the fracture without stealing her breath. Ruva watched his hands. For once she did not make a joke about his worried face. Boots stopped outside the infirmary. The door opened. Malrek entered in his white coat, spotless despite the mud and blood of the lower halls. The gold key at his throat rested against his chest like a medal. 4 arena guards filled the corridor behind him. His eyes went first to Ruva, then to Jonas, then to the empty tonic cup beside the bed. "How fortunate," he said. "Our champion has recovered." "Enough to win," Ruva replied. Malrek smiled. Confidence is such an attractive quality in property. Jonas stepped between them. Malrek's smile widened. Healer, you will remain here. Your services are no longer required at the final. Every fighter is entitled to a healer at the gate. And she will have one. A more obedient one. Jonas glanced at the guards. 2 carried clubs rather than swords. They had not come to escort Ruva. They had come for him. Ruva understood at the same moment. The same. Her hand closed around the hilt at her hip. Jonas shook his head once. Not here. Not now. Malrek noticed the exchange. Touching. Truly. But the city did not purchase seats to watch a healer and a gladiator stare at one another. He gestured toward the corridor. The crown trial begins in 12 minutes. The guards moved aside for Ruva. She did not move. Jonas turned toward her. In that narrow room, with Malrek watching and the bells still trembling in the walls, all the careful words he had saved seemed suddenly useless. Ruva solved the problem for him. If I survive, kiss me. She said it as if she were asking him to tighten a bandage. Jonas stared at her. One of the guards looked away. Malrek gave a quiet, amused breath. Ruva's expression remained perfectly serious. That is a terrible way to ask, Jonas said. I have had little practice. You could ask without making survival a condition. Would you prefer I ask after? I would prefer you come back and give me the opportunity to complain about your timing. Something warm moved behind her amber eyes. Then be ready, healer. She walked past Malrek and into the corridor. Jonas watched until the end of her braid vanished around the turn. Malrek remained in the doorway. A lovely promise, he said. It is a shame she will not collect it. Jonas faced him. The frost root is still in her blood. If you send her against a fresh champion, everyone will see what you did. Not a champion. Malrek adjusted one white cuff. 3. For the first time that morning, Jonas forgot to breathe. That violates the charter. The crown trial permits the master to choose any test worthy of freedom. No one survives 3 ranked fighters. Then freedom will remain as rare and valuable as it has always been. Malrek stepped closer. You should have taken the money, Jonas. The hospital would have praised you. Children would have blessed your name. Instead, you chose one woman who was foolish enough to believe the arena could keep a promise. You poisoned her. Prove it. The guard seized Jonas by both arms. Malrek took the ring of infirmary keys from his belt and closed the door from the outside. The lock turned. Jonas stood alone among clean bandages and empty bottles, while 40,000 people began to roar above him. The sound shook dust from the ceiling. For a moment, he allowed himself to be afraid. Then he looked at the preparation table. Malrek had destroyed the poisoned tonic and the scraping from the blade. He had taken the ledger page Jonas had hidden beneath the medicine chest. He had replaced the arena healers. He had locked every ordinary path to the sand. But Malrek had made one mistake. He believed a healer's work began with medicine and ended at a locked door. Jonas crossed to the furnace, pulled the iron poker free, and drove its narrow end between the hinges of the old medicine cupboard. The wood split on the third strike. Inside were fever salts, vinegar, linen, lamp oil, and a row of sealed emergency antidotes. One bottle was missing. Frost root antidote. The empty space was proof of nothing to a crowd. But the inventory seal pressed into the shelf beside it carried the arena master's private mark. Only Malrek's gold key could open that compartment without breaking the red wax. Jonas bent closer. The wax was unbroken. Someone had removed the bottle before the cupboard was sealed for the tournament. He searched the broken door and found a dark blue stain near the lower hinge. Frostroot tincture was nearly colorless until it touched iron. Then it turned blue. Malrek's servants had spilled it while hiding the evidence. Jonas cut away the stained sliver of wood, wrapped it in linen, and placed it inside his coat. He filled a second bottle with vinegar and took a shallow white examination dish from the table. Above him, the crowd thundered again. The first gate had opened. Ruva entered the arena alone. The winter sun struck the sand with a pale, merciless light. At the far side, 3 iron gates stood closed beneath the royal gallery. She had expected one opponent. The sight of 3 gates told her what Malrek had done before the herald spoke. For the final crown trial, the herald called, the undefeated Ruva of the Eastern Pits will face 3 champions of the Grand Arena. The crowd's excitement faltered. Even they understood the difference between danger and an execution. Malrek rose in his balcony. "One at a time," Ruva called. His answer carried through the speaking horn. "If they are feeling generous." All 3 gates began to rise. The first champion emerged with a tower shield and a short spear. The second carried 2 hooked blades. The third wore a closed helmet and held a long hammer in both hands. They spread across the sand. Ruva drew her sword. Her shoulder answered with a pulse of fire. She thought of Jonas, the concentration on his face when he stitched a wound, and mornings no bell could command. Then the spear came for her heart. Ruva turned just enough. The point passed beneath her arm. She caught the shaft, pulled the spearman off balance, and drove her knee into the rim of his shield. Pain tore through her rib, but the shield tilted. She struck his helmet with the flat of her blade and sent him stumbling into the path of the hooked fighter. The hammer fell where she had stood. Sand exploded around her boots. She moved before the dust cleared, not faster than the 3 men. Smarter. They had trained to surround one target, but they had never trained together. The spear needed distance. The hooks needed room to circle. The hammer needed both. Ruva gave them none. She stayed close to the shield, forcing the other 2 to hesitate. When the spear came again, she trapped it beneath her arm and turned. One hooked blade caught the wooden shaft. The second hook tore it from the champion's grip. Ruva kicked the broken spear toward the hammer fighter's feet. He stepped over it. That was what she wanted. She drove her shoulder into the shield. Her injured arm nearly collapsed, but the spearman fell backward over the shaft. Ruva took the shield from him and raised it an instant before the hammer struck. The impact split the wood and drove her to one knee. The arena tilted. Blood filled her mouth where one tusk cut her lip. The hooked fighter rushed in. Ruva threw the broken shield into his face. He flinched. She swept his legs and pressed her sword to the gap beneath his helmet. "Yield." He looked toward Malrek's balcony. "He owns my contract. He owns mine too. Then you understand." The fighter swung from the ground. Ruva blocked one hook, lost her sword to the other, and caught his wrist in both hands. Her shoulders screamed. For a terrifying second, there was no strength in it. Then she heard Jonas in memory. "Jonas, do not fight the joint. Change the angle." She turned with the hooked blade instead of against it. The man rolled. Ruva locked his arm behind him and struck the side of his helmet against the sand. He went still, breathing but beaten. The spear fighter had found his feet. The hammer fighter had found his range. Ruva had no sword. The crowd began a low chant. Then the voices joined. "One at a time, one at a time, one at a time." Malrek raised a hand for silence. The chant grew louder. Ruva smiled through the blood on her lip. The spear fighter heard it too. Shame entered his posture. He lowered the broken weapon. "I will not do this," he said. The crowd erupted. Malrek shouted an order from the balcony. The fighter removed his helmet and dropped it beside the spear. I yield. Only the hammer remained. He did not hesitate. His weapon rose. Ruva moved toward him, then stopped. The sun had flashed across a thin, wet line on the hammer's iron head. Dark blue liquid collected in one engraved groove. Frostroot. Malrek had not trusted 3 champions to finish the work. The hammer fell. Ruva twisted away, but a corner of the iron head grazed the leather above her hip. It did not break deeply. It did not need to. Cold spread beneath her skin. Her left leg weakened. The champion came again. Below the infirmary, Jonas pushed the examination table beneath a narrow ventilation opening. He climbed onto it, forced the rusted grate outward, and pulled himself into the service shaft. The passage had been designed for smoke, not men. Stone tore the shoulders of his coat. Twice he nearly became trapped. He crawled toward the roar of the crowd with the vinegar bottle clenched between his teeth and the white dish tied inside his shirt. He reached a vertical grate beneath the healer's gate. Through it, he saw Ruva stagger. The hammer champion struck again. Ruva caught the handle with both hands, but her poisoned leg folded beneath her. Jonas kicked the grate. It did not move. He kicked again. A guard on the other side turned. "Open it!" Jonas shouted. The guard recognized him. The master ordered, "Look at the hammer." The guard looked through the gate at the blue stain running along the iron. He had seen frostroot used on prisoners from the northern wars. His face changed. The hammer rose above Ruva. The guard pulled the bolt. Jonas burst onto the edge of the arena. "Poison!" His voice vanished beneath the crowd. He seized the healer's brass bell hanging beside the gate and struck it with the iron poker. The clear note cut through every other sound. All combat stopped. By ancient law, the healer's bell could halt a match when an unlawful weapon threatened the arena. Ignoring it meant admitting the death was intended. The hammer champion froze. Malrek leaned over his balcony. "Remove that man." Jonas stepped onto the sand. "The weapon is poisoned with frostroot." A desperate lie from a compromised healer. Then let the royal magistrate test it. Murmurs moved through the galleries. The magistrate in the private box stood. "What test?" Jonas placed the white dish on the sand and poured vinegar into it. Frostroot turns blue against iron and violet in strong vinegar. He held up the sliver of wood from the locked cupboard. This came from the sealed antidote cabinet. The cabinet bears the arena master's private mark. Its only antidote was removed before the tournament began. Malrek laughed, but too quickly. A piece of stained wood proves nothing. Then the hammer will prove everything. The magistrate pointed toward the champion. "Lower the weapon." The champion looked at Malrek. Malrek's hand tightened around the balcony rail. "Continue the match." No one moved. "I said continue." The champion stared at the blue poison on his hammer. Horror replaced obedience. He let the weapon fall. Jonas wrapped his hand in linen, scraped one drop from the iron, and mixed it into the vinegar. The clear liquid turned violet. 40,000 people saw it happen. Silence spread outward from the dish. Then the arena changed. It was anger, enormous and united. People who had paid to watch controlled violence understood they had been asked to applaud murder. Malrek stepped away from the rail. The magistrate's guards entered his balcony. He reached for the gold key at his throat. Ruva, still on one knee, saw what he meant to do. The key did not merely open contracts. It controlled the lower gate mechanisms. "Jonas!" she shouted. Malrek turned the key in a hidden lock. Above the healer's gate, a counterweight released. The iron portcullis dropped. Jonas looked up. Ruva threw herself across the sand. Her poisoned leg barely answered, but momentum carried her forward. She caught Jonas around the waist and pulled him clear as the portcullis crashed down where he had stood. They hit the sand together. Her broken ribs shifted. The world went white. Jonas rolled and found her face. Ruva. She could hear him, but sound had become distant. Her breath would not enter properly. The cold from the frost root climbed from her hip toward her chest. Jonas tore open the leather above the cut. The scratch was shallow. A blue edge stained the blood. "Antidote," he called. "The public cabinet beside the north gate. Green bottle, black seal." The guard who had freed him ran. Ruva caught Jonas's sleeve. "Did I win?" "You are not dying before we settle that." "That was not my question." The hammer champion approached slowly. He removed his helmet and placed it on the sand. Then he knelt. "I yield." The herald looked toward the magistrate. The magistrate looked at the three defeated champions, the Violet Dish and Malrek struggling between two royal guards. "The trial is concluded," she said. The herald lifted his horn. "Ruva of the Eastern Pits has won the crown of ashes." The crowd rose as one. Ruva closed her eyes. "There," she whispered. "Now you may panic." Jonas almost laughed. It came out as something closer to a sob. The antidote arrived. He broke the black seal, checked the scent and color, then looked at Ruva. Even now, even with poison moving through her body and the whole arena waiting, he did not force the bottle to her lips. "May I?" he asked. Her eyes opened. Always with the asking. Always. Ruva managed the smallest nod. Jonas gave her the antidote. The next hour passed in fragments. A stretcher, the ceiling moving above her and Jonas's voice following every turn. Somewhere, iron keys were taken from Malrek one by one. When Ruva woke, late afternoon sunlight lay across the infirmary floor. For the first time, the door stood open. No guard waited outside it. Her armor had been removed. Fresh bandages crossed her ribs and hip. Her shoulder rested in a sling. Every part of her body seemed to have submitted a separate complaint. Jonas sat asleep in the chair beside her, one hand still resting near her wrist as though he had been counting her pulse when exhaustion claimed him. Ruva watched him for a while. Without worry tightening his face, he looked younger. His hair had dried in several impossible directions. Violet frost root stained 2 fingers. A shallow cut marked his cheek from the service shaft. She moved her hand beneath his. Jonas woke immediately. "How long?" she asked. 6 hours. That is an undignified amount of sleep. You were unconscious. Exactly. His relief arrived slowly, as if he did not trust it. The poison is clearing. Your rib is stable. The shoulder will need rest. You say that word as though I might suddenly become reasonable. I am a healer. Hope is an occupational weakness. Ruva looked toward the open door. Malrek? In royal custody. The magistrate opened the contract vault. They found payments, false death records, and enough frost root to poison half the arena. My contract? Jonas reached into his coat and placed a folded parchment on the blanket. The black ownership seal had been cut away. Across the bottom, in fresh red wax, was the mark of the royal court. Released. Ruva stared at the word. She had imagined freedom so many times that the real thing looked too small. 1 piece of parchment. 7 letters. No thunder. No gate opening onto a field of sunlight. Her hand trembled when she touched it. The Crown Charter gave you 1 claim, Jonas said. The magistrate asked what you wanted. Ruva's voice was quiet. What did I say? You were barely awake, but you said it 3 times. My own freedom? No. She looked at him. Jonas placed a second document beside the first. It ordered every active fighter's contract reviewed, every medical debt erased, and every child held under a parent's contract released immediately. "You asked for the lower gates to be opened," he said. "For everyone." Ruva remembered nothing after the antidote. Yet the demand sounded like hers. Did they agree? The crowd was still chanting your name. Agreement became fashionable. Beyond the infirmary, voices filled the corridor. Not guards giving orders, fighters laughing, arguing, and calling for friends they had not been allowed to visit. Boots moved toward the outer gate. Ruva listened. Years of discipline held her face still. One tear escaped anyway. Jonas pretended not to notice until she took his hand. "Do not be polite now," she said. He moved closer. Ruva leaned her forehead against his. They stayed that way while the arena emptied around them. After a time, Jonas whispered, "There is something we have not discussed." "My shoulder?" "No." "My rib?" "No." "The condition of your coat?" "Beyond saving." Ruva's tusks showed with the beginning of a smile. "Then I cannot imagine." Jonas drew back enough to look at her. "You survived." The room seemed to become very quiet. Ruva's hand tightened around his. "I did." "And you made a request." "I remember." "You were poisoned, injured, and facing 3 champions. I am willing to consider that the request may have been made under unusual pressure." "Jonas?" "Yes?" "You are speaking too much." He smiled then, helplessly and completely. His free hand rose toward her face, but stopped before touching her cheek. "May I?" Ruva looked at the man who had asked permission the first time he removed her armor, the first time he reset her shoulder, the first time he touched every scar the arena believed it owned. No one had ever made gentleness feel so much like courage. "You already have permission," she said. Jonas kissed her. It was not the triumphant kiss a ballad would have invented for them. There were no musicians. Ruva's lip was split. Jonas smelled faintly of vinegar, and both of them were too tired to pretend otherwise. It was careful at first. Then Ruva put her good hand behind his neck and kissed him again, with all the certainty she had once saved for battle. Jonas forgot the open door, the noisy corridor, and every sensible thought he had ever possessed. When they separated, Ruva kept him close. "Was that medically necessary?" she asked. "I may need to repeat the treatment." "Frequently." "For observation." "Your methods are improving." He kissed the corner of her mouth. Outside, someone cheered. Whether the unseen witness had seen them or was celebrating freedom, neither cared. 3 months later, the Grand Arena reopened under a different name. Ownership contracts and debt combat were gone. Every fighter entered by choice, earned a fair wage, and left through an open gate. Ruva refused every offer to become its new master. She accepted the position of combat instructor only after changing the title to instructor, removing the private balcony, and ordering every white coat in the building burned. Jonas objected to the last part on practical grounds. "Perfectly good cloth," he said. Ruva dropped another coat into the courtyard fire. Terrible color. The Eastern Hospital received the money Malrek had promised and never intended to pay. Jonas divided his time between its new ward and a clinic beside the training rooms. The clinic door had no lock. Above it hung a wooden sign carved by Ruva herself. "Ask first." The fighters laughed until they understood what the sign meant. Jonas never asked for stories they did not offer. Ruva's rib healed slowly. Her shoulder took longer. She followed almost none of Jonas's instructions, and all of the important ones. On cold mornings, he found her exercising before sunrise. "Rest," he would say. "I rested yesterday." You complained in a chair for 20 minutes. It was exhausting. He would check the shoulder. She would pretend not to enjoy his hands on her. Neither of them fooled anyone. In early spring, a letter arrived from the eastern settlements. Ruva read it alone beside the open arena gate. The message was short. A village seal marked the bottom, and inside the fold someone had tied a single copper ring. Her younger sister was alive. The news of the crown trial had traveled farther than anyone expected. She had seen Ruva's description in a printed account. The braid, the tusks, the scar across her nose, and the 3 copper rings she wore for the family she feared she would never see again. The letter said she would come when the mountain roads cleared. Jonas found Ruva still holding it after sunset. He did not ask to read it. He simply stood beside her until she handed it to him. When he finished, he looked toward the road beyond the city wall. "We will need another room." Ruva studied him. "We?" He realized what he had said. For a man who had faced an arena master before 40,000 people, Jonas looked remarkably frightened. "I thought," he began, "if you wanted. There is space above the clinic, and I already spend most nights there, and your rooms in the old fighter's wing are cold, and you are speaking too much again." He stopped. Ruva slipped the copper ring onto the end of her braid. "Ask properly." Jonas took both her hands. "Will you make a home with me?" She let him wait just long enough to understand that this answer was hers alone. No crowd could demand it. No contract could record it. No key could lock it in place. "Yes," she said. Their home above the clinic was small. Jonas filled it with books, and Ruva built shelves while complaining that books were poor furniture. Some nights, old fears woke one of them. The other lit a lamp and remained close until the room became theirs again. They healed slowly, imperfectly, and together. When her sister finally arrived, Ruva waited outside the eastern gate in a dark red cloak. Jonas stood several steps behind her, close enough to be found and far enough to leave the reunion entirely hers. 2 women saw the matching copper rings in each other's hair. The years between them disappeared. Ruva's sister ran. Ruva caught her. Jonas looked away for a moment, not from discomfort, but because some happiness deserved privacy even beneath an open sky. That evening, the clinic table became a dining table. Friends brought stew, wine, and a loaf. Ruva declared an insult to grain. They ate it anyway. Near midnight, Ruva found Jonas alone on the balcony above the street. The city bells marked the hour. They no longer sounded like a command. She stood beside him and rested her head on his shoulder, just as she had during that last night before the crown trial. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That you still owe me something." Jonas turned. "I distinctly remember paying that debt. Once. There was no agreed limit. A serious oversight for a man who reads contracts." He brushed one thumb over the scar across her nose. "May I?" Ruva smiled. "Always." He kissed her beneath the quiet bells. The arena taught Ruva to survive. Jonas taught her to live. The rest they learned together.